I'm delighted today to be joined by the one and only Gareth Timmins, who is the author of a book that really resonated with me, the 0.1% mindset. Gareth, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, mate. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Can I take you back to the beginning, Gareth? How did you develop an interest in joining the Marines? This is the elite of the elite.
Yeah, I I played rugby from a really young age, from like being 7 or 8 years old, and by the time I was 15, I'd started. I was doing all right in my age group. I got selected for Yorkshire at a really pivotal age, under 16s, and then from there I went to Bradford Academy, Bradford Bulls and Leeds Rhinos Academy, eventually, and I were at Leeds for 3 years. Um, I had some relative decent successes at Leeds as a young lad, I suppose. And they offered me a contract, but the contract just wasn't good. It wasn't financially where I felt my value was as a person. And I think value is absolutely massive. And I think if you can really establish what your value is,
Mm.
uh, it's a really, really powerful thing. And I've come to really um, um, not respect my value, but really know that if my value code's been broken, that then I must leave or I must do something about it. I Leeds didn't offer me the money that I wanted, so I left. I went into absolute chaos and turmoil in my personal life because the structures and the routines had gone from professional sport, and I was just kind of left in no man's land. I saw the Marines looking for Saddam's sons in Iraq, and I said that that's exactly it just
Mm.
resonated with me. I was like, that's exactly what I want to do. And I've been soul searching for a year and a
Mm.
half, 2 years. And the rest is kind of history, really,
Mm.
mate. I went to the Leeds Careers Office, registered, some setbacks, and whatnot, and some hurdles to overcome and stuff. But um, I went in 2005, and I went all the way through, and uh, it was the hardest and most brutal thing I've ever done in my life, and whatnot. But looking back, it was the greatest period of my life for training.
It sounds like, Gareth, that firstly, knowing your worth is very important to you. And even though your passion for a certain period of time was the rugby, you realize that they weren't actually meeting your own estimation of your worth. And the second thing is, it sounds like that after that period, you were kind of lost for a while and
Yeah.
you were trying to fill that void with stuff that wasn't really touching the sides of that and that the kind of the Marines kind of filled that void. What was the hardest part of that for you?
Uh, I went in and first and foremost, I got fully prepared mentally and physically. But there was still a massive unknown, and I didn't think I could do it. I just thought I will get as far as I can, and ultimately, any kind of exposure to that environment will ultimately make me a more rounded and better person. It'll definitely put me in a better place than what I'm in now, which there were no options on the table other than probably going to jail. Um, I wasn't interested in the office or anything like that, or any kind of trades. So when I got in there, I was so scared of failing and so scared of having to go home with my kind of like my tail between my legs and say, look, I've fallen short. I was so scared of that. That kept me in. And
Mm.
even when times when motivation kind of went, which it does, uh, and I were absolutely so disillusioned and thinking, because you do look back with rose tinted glasses and just think, you know what,
Mm.
I might accept a bit of that life that I had before. Maybe I've got this wrong. But I was so scared of going back because you'll know, mate, there's nothing you can say to people that will ever be okay.
Mm.
There's no excuse that you could ever come up with. They will always know that you've failed and that you've fallen short, and I couldn't live with myself for that.
Mm.
Uh, that was stronger than any other
Mm.
negative emotion that I were experiencing, and ultimately that just kept me in. I never quit.
Can I ask you, when was the struggle at its worst? Was there a tipping point? Was there a moment that you can remember that the struggle was at its hardest?
I think the first ten weeks are arguably the most horrendous. But then, although you get more of an understanding of the place and you become more familiar, and your emotional kind of alarm bells start to align with the environment. It probably happens after about 6 or 8 weeks, and you feel like you've been there for years.
Mm.
But I think the first 10 weeks were arguably the worst. You're not enjoying it and it's uncomfortable and it is horrendous. But when people start leaving and putting their hand up and saying that they can't do it, you kind of you draw strength from that and that empowers you and you almost like you get their power. You get
Mm,
whatever energy they've got left and it energizes you and it just it's like a vehicle for pushing you on. But I think roundabout like I had momentary uh, psychological moments where I just thought this is I don't want to be here anymore. This is not what I want to do. Even at like week 25, and
mm,
at that point, what 7 weeks to push. I just thought this is not what I thought it was going to be like. But I was
mm,
also excited. But by that point, I think when I got to like week 20 or week 22, I thought, barring injury, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And
mm,
I were quite excited, but quite in absolute amazement and just this sense of this unbelievable sense that I think I can do it.
mm. It sounds like you were kind of that moment of exhilaration that, you know what, actually, I
Yeah.
have the capacity to do this.
Yeah, and you haven't got that. And I think the beauty of the course and why it's so unbelievable in terms of whoever's designed
Mm,
this thing is you never know that you're going to do it until you've done it. You can't
mm.
because you could get injured at any point,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there's people that break the legs, lower limb fractures, the hips, whatever, on the 30 miler, and that's the last commando test. So you
Mm,
never know you're going to do it until you've done it. But I can remember vividly when I got into the 20s of training,
mm,
the week 20s of training, I definitely had I were able to look forward a bit and just think, you know what, I know I'm not going to quit now, and I'm not going
mm.
to walk away. And barring injury, I think I can do it.
It sounds there, Garrett, from what you're talking about, is that there's an ultimate life lesson in the actual training inbuilt, either implicit or by accident, that it's only when you're pushed to the pin of your collar that you find out your character. You actually
Yeah,
find out what's inside of you. And normally you've got more inside of you than you realize. But I want to take you to something there you said about fear. It sounds like you were able to turn fear into fuel rather than kind of wilting with the fear. And I know you've been on like a boy's own adventure. You've been in the middle of the sea and on an oil tanker surrounded by Somalian warlords and your own life on the line. How have you managed to do that? Or was that another thing you discovered by accident that you could turn fear into fuel?
I think it was accident, mate, to be honest. And at the time, I didn't realize that, like, looking at the fear of failure was such a solid anchor of staying in the process, of being successful. I mean, there's been research that's come out recently where they've looked at if you load value onto an end goal, like if I complete this goal, it will give me X, Y, and Z. That's all well and good. But what happens then? What they've looked at through research is when you become disillusioned, you forget about that because
Mm,
your motivation's gone.
mm,
So what they've looked at recently, and this all ties in with what I kind of self-discovered really, but whilst being engaged in that process is that if you're going for a really, really complex and arduous goal, you should always write down what failure looks like and what you stand to re-inherit if you're unsuccessful.
mm,
Because we forget about that during the process and we look back with
mm,
rose-tinted glasses. And it's almost like we take it back on, just very, very similar to like a failed relationship.
mm,
Uh, there's a reason why that relationship broke down sometimes, but yet sometimes you do go back to your ex-partner. And it's not
mm,
until you get back that you're like, wow, I should
mm,
never have gone back. And it's
mm.
exactly the same as what happens with any kind of arduous and complex undertaking. But fear of failure, without a doubt, I mean, yeah, I mean, I was absolutely able to, and I've done that ever since, is turn the fear of failure into a very, very like powerful anchor of stability.
So you're effectively saying, Garrett, to look the opportunity cost in the eye, to actually know what the price of failure is, and rather than try to ignore it, factor it in, and
Yeah.
actually that kind of focuses your mind even more on moving forward. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, that's absolutely it. It's like there's a reason why you're leaving. There's a reason why that you want to go on this journey. Uh, and you must acknowledge and write these reasons down because we forget about them.
There was something also very interesting in your book, and we spoke at the start about the authenticity of your journey as described in the book, Gareth. I heard it said one time that there's only one thing worse than getting what you want. That's getting what you want. And you describe in the book that when you became that commando, the kind of the your Mount Everest moment, it was actually anticlimactic. It was
Yeah.
actually filled with disappointment. Could you speak to that, please?
Yeah, so I've always had this, John. I've always had this and I don't know whether this is uh systemic of the achievements that I've kind of completed and that I've done. But I got to the end of training and the immediate sense was just an absolute sense of relief. That's what I felt, relief that the nightmare is over. Because although
Mm,
it's 10 months to a year, it feels like a lifetime. It feels like you've
mm,
been in this nightmare forever. So the immediate sense was one of relief. And then I had this massive uh, elation and euphoria that I'd done it. And that probably lasted all of 24 to 48 hours max. And then I
mm,
was straight back into, well, that's done. It's in the past now. Yeah, I've got it. I've got the title and whatnot. And it is the greatest thing that I've ever done in terms
mm,
of how it changed my life and set me up. But um I just think that from a psychological perspective, what we fail to acknowledge is that while ever we're on the journey towards something, we're growing, we're becoming, we're transforming. Some majority of the time for the
mm,
better. When we get to the end of it, like we get to the end of anything, we're marking a point where psychologically we're going to come down, we're going to fall. And it's the same like you were with like say like Bradley Wiggins that won the Tour de France and whatnot, and all these other people that win big or they get the lifetime achievement done, and that's followed by a bout of depression. So I've
yeah.
looked at it for book two and looked at like uh, basically regulation and like basically what goes up, it must come
Mm,
down. And
yeah.
talking about energy and a prescription of thinking, how can you maintain a certain mindset and prescription of thinking?
At the stage of your life now where you are, Gareth, and looking back and also looking forward, what does success mean to you?
I think it's a really great question, that mate. Uh, I always thought that success to me was um title, kind of like status, but success, the underlying key theme of success for me was one of financial.
Mm,
To have tons of money, and have the houses, the cars, all the kind of the big things that we do value. So it's completely changed for me now, in a really good way, and I think that's kind of systemic of working for some really, really wealthy people in a
mm,
security, close protection capacity, and just seeing that wealth, uh, absolutely consistently with every single family has not brought them happiness.
wow.
In matter of fact, it's brought them, it's destroyed the families, and it has they've been so unhappy. So
Mm,
success for me is it, 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 it it's closely linked with fulfillment, but my fulfillment is not no longer. I will always chase and try and do more books and try and innovate and do all this, uh, kind of rewrite the landscape really in mindset and performance and whatnot, and try and change the game a bit. But my fulfillment comes in my relationships now, and that's where I know it is. That's where I'm my most happiest, is being present in my relationships, investing in that, and creating a lifestyle that's not underpinned so much by financial uh, security and whatnot and prosperity,
mm,
but just more in doing lovely, wholesome things.
mm,
And that's where I know my fulfillment is and where it lies.
mm.
While ever I chase down these achievements and think that at the end, when I cross the finish line, I'm going to have this enduring fulfillment and happiness, I will always be let down.
Happiness is a journey rather than a destination, really, that we kind of put a lot of store in always being permanently happy. And that's a kind of a lost cause because there's going to be ups and downs in life. And it also strikes me as you're speaking that you're saying that material success, while it's nice, there's no nutritional value in it. it
No,
doesn't really sustain us going forward. And you've seen that very up close and personal, literally.
absolutely. I mean, it's. I think financial. Everybody wants to be comfortable financially. Some people want more than others for various different things, but it is very much an artificial commodity, and I think that we society has been constructed in a way where we absolutely think by chasing down these things, by hammering the corporate environment and raising the ladder and getting the bonuses and getting the big houses, that we're going to be ultimately happy. And I think that what happens is if we're not careful, we end up in relationships that aren't healthy, that have probably been neglected because we've been chasing and we've been looking the other way. And all of a sudden you've arrived at a place that you've got what you wanted if you've really been consistent and gone after it. But there's a void. And we're told that if you get X, Y, and Z, that's happiness. But then the disconnect comes is when I suppose you sit down on a night and you look around and you're like, I'm not happy.
Mm.
There's a problem. I should be happy because society
Mm.
tells me if I've got X, Y, and Z, I should be happy, but I'm not happy.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I feel like I've seen through that a little bit.
What are the sources of your joy? You mentioned relationships.
I love success. I love doing things that my work's recognized. I love the fact that my work's recognized. I never really get tired of hearing that,
Mm.
and how it's kind of affected and changed people. I would love that. Uh, I think in terms of from a personal perspective, it's living the life that I want to live. That is training really well, really, really involved in fitness. That's like an enduring kind of fabric of me and whatnot, and that's what really makes me happy. Uh, but just being out in nature and being connected, I think
Mm.
is the answer. Is being connected
Mm.
uh, and understanding myself. And I think it's a really key message is that um, I don't think that you can ever really find fulfillment unless you really invest time in understanding yourself, understanding your body, knowing your body, but knowing your mind as well, and knowing what you like and dislike at either end of the spectrum. I think unless you've been on that journey or you're willing to go on a journey of self-discovery, I think you might always be chasing if you're not careful.
We started this conversation by talking about knowing your worth. And we also mentioned values. And it sounds like you've been on this journey, Garrett, of understanding yourself. And there was a moment in the book that really struck me very forcibly. You, you speak very vividly about an initiation ritual, which, and in your words, was horrific, where you had to, as part of the process, eat the remains of rotting food into tranches. You were locked into a locker. And then it gets worse. I got a sense from reading this, Garrett, that you were kind of, and I wonder, was there a moment you said, I'm not like these guys. I'm a little bit more advanced in that self discovery journey than these guys who seem to be taking pleasure, almost sadistic pleasure, in the degradation of
That's a
a fellow human being.
Yeah,
I wonder if you could speak about that because it really is very powerful in the book.
yeah. I'm really happy that I'm like that you've kind of seen that, John. I've never really liked uh, sometimes pack mentality.
Mm.
And I think that when a group of males get together, and I've seen it in rugby and in the Marines, and the high energy,
Mm.
uh, and they're taking on high risk or they're in a high risk, really structured environment, I think you can start getting negative behaviors
Mm.
when boredom creeps in and they're not stimulated. An initiation, I mean, it's finished now, but I never bought into it. There were
Mm.
stories, there was stuff that happened at various units that, uh, I mean, culturally, from a cultural perspective, it was the culture of the Royal Marines, and I'm not saying there's anything particularly wrong with that, but I didn't like it. I didn't like being a part of it. Obviously, who would? But I didn't
Mm.
like spectating either one side. um, been through the process, and I certainly never would have uh, run one or been a part of it. I didn't like it. I thought that it was. I didn't feel that it was necessary.
Yeah.
I think if you've been through training, which from when you walk into the careers office to get into the end, you're probably looking at 2 to 2.5 years in the process. I think that's enough.
Mm.
I think if you've got to the end and you've got your green beret and your commando flashes and you've done the 30 miler, I don't know why there has to be any extras. So I just thought that I thought it was distasteful.
It sounds like cracking it up with a hammer.
Yes, yeah, I just thought it were really, I thought it were distasteful and it got abused.
Mm.
It got abused. The lines of fun and initiation went more into uh really taking advantage of some poor lads, and it wasn't needed.
I heard a phrase one time, Garrett, just to conclude our interview. The world breaks all of us, but some of us come back stronger in the broken places. And it sounds that your whole journey, the good, the bad, and the ugly, has made you who you are. What's next?
Yes, so I'm now the director of retreat and leadership operations at a place called the Herculean Club up in the Lake District, which is a new corporate retreat. Doing a PhD, uh, or at the very start of doing a PhD, looking at gauging atmospherics and how we can apply them to look at better decision making, rapid decision making, more effective in corporate environments, and looking at book three, just dedicated to making a difference, John, really, and staying in the mindset field and writing. I think that's what I'm kind of here to do, from a more spiritualist standpoint. But yeah, just doing the good stuff.
I like to say, Garrett, that we're on this world or on this planet for the short space of time to be mad, and that means to make a difference. And I'd
Yeah,
like to conclude by I tell young people, particularly, that we're all leaders, and leadership is about what you do on a day to day basis to lift other people up. I wonder what, if you could give one piece of advice, a lesson that you've learned, either the easy or the hard way, that would have saved young Gareth Timmins in secondary school a lot of hardship and pain. What one lesson would you go back to tell him?
I would go back and I would tell anybody that at baseline you are ready, uh, and you should absolutely back yourself. Just before I went in the Marines, I kind of lost my nerve a bit, and I decided to go for the Royal Navy. And I said to my dad, I I'm going to go for the Navy, and he just said, "Look, you're ready. Stop messing about. You're ready. If that's what you want to do, go for it, and just back yourself."
Mm.
Uh, and I did, and it changed my life. And I think that we always, as human beings, we're always looking at other people and thinking that that's them and that's not me. And I wish I was them.
Mm.
But I always say, and I've said this in a podcast before, why can't it be you?
Mm.
It has to be somebody.
Mm.
There has to be these people that are coming through. Same with me with writing. I had massive imposter syndrome before my first book, and I was thinking, is this me? Have I got any credibility? And it's done really, really well.
Mm.
So just back yourself and just get out there. And I think Richard Branson's got a fantastic quote where he just says, "Just take the job and learn while you're at it." And I think that's it. Just get into it.
Or believe in yourself, back yourself, compare yourself to nobody but the person you were yesterday, and
Yeah,
keep showing up as the best version of yourself. It has to be somebody, so why can't it be you?
that's it. That's it.
Garrett, thank you so much indeed for taking the time and the trouble. Your book is a joy.
Thank you, mate.